Start recording. Okay. And now it's decided to do an autosave because that's the way of the world. The moment you start recording, happens on all my Twitch streams. Right, okay. So let's make a new material. And yep, I had caps lock down as well. And I'm going to give myself this horrible, ugly looking texture. And I'm going to plug this in here. So at the moment, this is using UVs. And I don't want it to use the UVs. I want it to use the vertex space, the world space, as a coordinate system. And I also want to adjust for the fact that we are going to deal with absolute world position. But then I will also want to give myself a little bit of an offset, because as you can see, if I deal with the world position, I get this horrible symmetry pattern, which just looks a bit ugly. So, okay, how am I going to do this? So the first part of the node is the position. Come on, position. World position. So this is absolute world position. It's not the object position, it's the world position. Did I just manage to get rid of my texture? Texture. And here's my texture sample, which can run into my UVs, which can run into my base color. So the first thing that happens is I get an error because I'm trying to run a 3D vector into a 2D vector, and it says you can't do that. So I need to mask. Component mask is what I want. And the component mask will let me filter out up to, there's a 4 vector coming in, and I can filter out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 vectors. So X and Y and R and G are the same thing. So I'm going to only use R and G as my texture coordinates. And the error goes away. And now you can see, yeah, I got something really wacky going on. And there's just millions of them. And the reason, of course, there's millions is because world space goes up very, very quickly. And UV space goes up very, very slowly. If you can think that UV space basically goes from 0 to 1 for the entire texture, whereas 1 centimeter in Unreal is not very far. So obviously I need to scale this down. So I'm going to do a divide. And to begin with, I'm going to set my divide to be about 1,000 so that we can actually see it. Okay. And so what we now get is a projection. Basically, our X and Y coordinates are coming out of here and going into here and going through our texture space and being spat out into the base color. Let me save this into the world. And let's stick it on here. And give this a little bit of rotation. So you can see now that what's happening is that we have this surface. And if I move this around, you can see that the texture is sticking in world space. And you can see that as we get to the edge, the texture will start to stretch. and that's because we're only projecting in one coordinate. So I need to fix that. I need to do more than one coordinate space. Okay, so let's do the next coordinate space. Let's shuffle these two together. And this time, I'm going to take the output from here. I'm going to run it through. This time, I'm not running it through X and Y. I'm running it through Y and Z. And now I go, oh, hang on a minute. I want to plug this in as well. So I need to blend these two textures together. And there are different ways that you can blend this. In my original, I have done a multiply and I have done an add. And I will come to the multiply a bit later. But so if I just add these two textures together, they're going to get brighter because that's what happens when we add colours. I'm going to stick with the add for the moment. So my texture is going to get artificially bright, but I don't mind that. It'll all work out in the wash. Okay, so what I've got now is you can see the streaking from one set of coordinates, and you can see the streaking from another set. So if I go around here, you can see that I've got coordinates that are coming down, and I've got coordinates that are coming along this axis. So you can see that you can see the streaking that's caused by the projection down the z-axis, but it's kind of masked by the fact that you can now see a different pattern which is coming along this x-axis. And again, if I rotate it round so we're looking down the y-axis, you can see that we get both streaking along here and we get streaking down here. So we've still got texture stretching. We haven't fixed all of the problems, and that's because we have the y-axis to do. So let's go back and fix our y-axis, which again will be a case of taking this and copying it. And this time, obviously, if we're going down the y-axis, we need the x and the z-axis. And let's add them again. So this goes into here, and this goes into here, and I'm going to add this to here. And I'm going to plug this from here to here. So basically we now have our world coordinates, which are then scaled down. They're going through masks that will spit out a Z, an X and a Y, and then that basically those textures get added together and go into our base color. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so now if we look at this, we can see the stretching along the Z and along the X, but now we can see that we have a projection along the Y, and it's looking okay, but it's a bit speckled. Now the problem is that these textures are all getting added up together, which means that on the axes in which it's stretched, it's still making the same influence as the other two textures which are not stretched. So obviously what we need to do is we need a way of blending out that texture so that it doesn't show on the axis in which it is going to get stretched. Okay, that was weird. So if I go back here and I go, okay, how am I going to get rid of this? Well, one of the things I can do is if I multiply by another number, if that number is less than 1, then this will decrease. And obviously, if I multiply it by a number greater than 1, it's going to increase. So, if I am projecting, in this case, along the xy axis, the number I want to multiply by is the z axis. How weird is that? But true. So let's see what happens if I take this mask, not that.
Oh, it's gone again.
That's not cool. Is there a dodgy cable? Probably, because look at it. Whee!
Oh.
Okay, we'll try and put up with the occasional blank screen. Right, okay then. So, if I feed this into here and I mask out... and I mask out everything except Z. So I only have Z coming out. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a multiply. We're following along so far?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's just ignore these two for the moment. Let's just spit this in here and see what happens. So, this value coming out of here is our Z value, and if I look down here you can see that we can see some texture, and as we get towards the side it goes really dark, and then as we go and look on the bottom it's completely black, and that's because Z is either positive or negative. And we would like it to be not black on the bottom. We want it to be, again, we want it to be a solid colour on the bottom. So I need to fix this by saying absolute, which basically says if it's a negative number, make it a positive number. And if it's a positive number, keep it a positive number. And you can see now, if I look down on the top, you can see I have a texture. And if I go back and I start to look underneath, you can see I have a texture. It's not very well lit. And it probably doesn't show on the projector, but trust me, you can trust me, it's there. As opposed to my picture, which is not there. Is it because it's getting too warm in this room and the projector is going, oh, I'm overheating. Is it something random like that?
No, not the
now I have a picture and you don't. And then I click this button and it makes art. Isn't that awesome? That's wonderful. Oh, you can't see it. Oh. Right. Okay then. So I'm just going to stick it in the scene so you can see what's happening on this model again. So if I have this surface pointing up, you can see that I'm getting a texture, and if I rotate this surface so that we're looking at the side, you can see that it goes black. Now if I add black, yeah, I don't add anything. That's significant. That's the important thing. So if I go back to this texture, whee, right, if I'm adding nothing, then obviously I'm adding nothing. I'm adding 0. So I can go back here and I can start adding these up. So this comes out of here. This is all cunning plan, and it adds to this, which is then going to go into here. So what I've got is I take my world space, I divide it down, I mask the X and Y, I multiply it by Z, and then I can add the other components in. So I need to do the same for the other components. So I need these 3 bits. So I'm going to duplicate them. So the mask here, this is, let me move this up. This one is G and B, so the missing one is R. GBR. This multiplies and goes in here. And then finally we have this one. So I'm going to plug this one in. It's gone again. Oh dear. Yay, okay, we're back. Right. So this is RB. So this should be G, because it's the missing component. The missing component goes into the absolute goes into the multiply. We multiply this by this. Ah. Is it a dodgy cable? Since they've moved this computer, it's bound to be a dodgy cable, I don't know. Okay, yay, we're back. Right, okay then. Just in time for an autosave. Oh, we get to see the autosave and then the screen goes off again. Right, okay then. Right, so what I've got is I've got these 3 triplanar projections. I've got them multiplying together. I'm going to apply them. That looks a bit streaky to me. What have I done wrong? This is RG. This is R. Red, green, blue. This is red, green, blue. This is multiplied. This is multiplied. This is multiplied. That's an absolute. That's an absolute. That looks right. That looks right. They're added together and they go in the base colour. Can I not apply it to the scene? I thought I had. Okay, that looks good on there. Okay, that looks better. So, what we should get is something which we can rotate about. And a bit like the shader we did in Max last year, it blends all 3 sets of textures together and gives us something that no matter how complicated a surface, so this is my console, it's pretty complicated. I can chuck it on there. That doesn't look good. Why is it stretched? Thank you. Okay, clearly there's something wrong between this texture, the one I made earlier, aha, I've got it wrong. Look, I should have taken the vertex normal. Shocking. Sorry.
Come on.
It's a good job I made one earlier, isn't it? hey, you know, at least I made a mistake and then spotted my mistake, and now I know why I made a mistake. Right. Okay. My apologies. This comes from the vertex normal. Vertex normal world space. That plugs into there, that plugs into there, that plugs into there. Let's apply that. That looks better. Now I can rotate this round. And, oops, don't want to rotate that. Reset. Okay, so now when I stick this on a surface, it doesn't matter how curvy the surface is. As you can see, there are no texture seams on any of the curved edges. Obviously there's texture seams on hard edges because that's what you can see. Right, okay, there is this annoying, wrong one, this annoying, have I got it in such a position whereby we can see the repeating pattern, or should I do it on this object? Let me just put in a sphere. Oh, I think I needed a bit more tessellated than that. Can I not have more than 5? Can't. Okay. Can't see any. I'm looking for the seam.
If you get stuck, go and pop in and you can set it up.
Yeah, but it's not supposed to be. There's definitely a seam.
I know you spotted it when it was vertical.
Let me reset it and reset that and reset that. And do we see?
And we can do it back up. So the only thing that would have to be replaced would be, of course, the assets, materials, PSD files. We'll still upload those up to the OneDrive, so they're always there. So if something does go awry on GitHub, it still has something to back up on. So it was always told it's good to have more than one place to back it up in case something doesn't go right.
Can we, for instance, upload a separate folder or a separate project, if you will, not an Unreal project,
Okay.
a separate place?
Well, I will fix it anyway, even though we can't see it.
Nice. Well done.
Right. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to change where this texture start and ends. Let me just pick one that's a little bit more obvious. So here and Okay, I've changed the texture to something that should be a lot more obvious. Now the problem is that I need to move this around. Does anyone care?
We do, but we're just tired.
It's gonna be big to where it starts and ends. Yeah.
So if I move the object, whee! Right, if I move the object, what happens is that I am going to get, what's the best way of describing this? If I move the object, the texture doesn't move with it, which means that I could end up with a problem whereby the texture's not at the right position. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to offset the textures. So how do I offset these textures? Well, the way I do it is I just need to add something to here. So if I pull this out and do an add, so what do I need to add? So what if I add the object position in world space? Then when I move it, no, I've lied, it hasn't worked. Why have you not worked?
You saved from that opening area.
Because I did it in the wrong place.
See right here, all these, those are the changes you made.
So the add goes.
I think the add goes first. That seems more logical. I might be wrong. I might have got it all wrong.
That will update.
That's not right.
The reason we were doing is adding in blueprints.
Because it's not an add, it's a subtract. Ah,
Oh no!
It really isn't that one. It should be in there.
Does that mean there's no ads anywhere? Oh no, there is anyone.
The blueprint looks as home.
let's see if I get it right this time.
Check out your check your one.
Okay.
Cobra. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. So I now should be able to chuck this on my object.
Migrate
That would make it
regardless.
10 less, but it looks
But we'll push it and we'll see how it goes when it goes to her computer.
So what node goes into subtract now?
Do you want to learn how to use GitHub?
There's not entirely my shop, because that is
Object
definitely more than 10.
So I take the object position and I subtract it from the world position, and then I divide by a big number, which depends on how big you want the texture to be. And again, just to finesse it, what I sometimes do is I add. If you suddenly find that your symmetry is looking ugly, or you just don't like the texture position, no, let's not.
Yeah, Will's adding the end this.
Oh, wait.
Ends.
It looks here, the texture.
Only one person showed up. Because there might be two people what has previously left up already. Well, to be fair. That's well, 4 weeks.
So basically what you can do is you can add another value, you can make this a parameter, and then anything you do to this will basically shift the texture over. So if I shift this red value down a bit and apply it, you should see the texture shift. So let's make this as big as we can.
I haven't had dinner yet.
I'm going to put these back to how they were, because the more bespoke your texture, the worse it's going to look. So basically this is ideal for rust or very generic looking surfaces. I'm going to feed that back in. So what I want is